Good evening. Welcome to Community and Technology, where we connect the global community with news, information, and resources that we hope will help improve your life. I'm Stu Reader here with my co-host, Dave Bernstein. Hey, Dave.
Hello, I'm back from the metaverse, and then we go to
Where?
the real world.
The where? Where, Dave?
Ah, a digital fashion show with 23 animations from the metaverse.
Wow.
Almost all amateurish and god awful, none of them particularly exciting, but this is our future. And of course, we're going to go back to our present. Why don't you introduce our guests so we know what's coming?
Okay. Well, we have a very special guest today. Bennett Cypher is a staff technologist on the tech projects team at the Electronic Frontier Foundation, or EFF. There he works with a variety of teams across the EFF, focusing on consumer privacy, competition, and state legislation. He also assists with the development of Privacy Badger, which we're going to hear about as we get into the show. Bennett, welcome to Community and Technology.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're excited. We're going to talk to you about some of the stuff you're doing, but I just want to finish with Dave's little update about this metaverse fashion show. I don't quite understand what the heck is a digital fashion show, Dave?
Well, there are thousands of designers around the world designing clothes for your avatar to wear in the metaverse. Most of them are absurd. Many of them, of course, since you can do whatever you like in the metaverse, defy gravity, logic, the inability of most people to walk on 14-inch heels. Like most fashion, there's very little there to appeal to straight men, but that's not the audience they're aiming at with the fashion show. But it's all unreal. It was held in an art gallery, which had a series of pictures on the wall taken by cell phones in different parts of the world. Why they were in Niantic, what's Pokemon? And that was a major art exhibit sponsored by David Lynch. These are all fascinating things, maybe, usually pretty disappointing in real life, and maybe showing what's going to be happening to all of us. Maybe we're all going to sit on our couch or something more immersive and pretend to be somebody else. They don't know you're a dog on the internet, and I certainly wouldn't look 70 years old in my avatar, so who knows how I'll present. But all the fashion people are there. They are making a world. Now, one of the things they were missing is how much of this metaverse, when it happens, is going to be Chinese. I follow the Chinese press. Remember, TikTok is Chinese, and many of the biggest companies on the internet are Chinese. The government is supporting everything, and they may be bigger on the metaverse than Facebook. There's loads and loads coming, none of which was reflected in this fashion show. But one of the things that's coming from China beat Apple. We're recording a week in advance. We just got the new Apple announcement that they're going to be able to converse via satellite from your cell phone. But the day before, Huawei announced they were ready to go, sending short messages via Chinese Beidou satellite. Of course, a month ago, Elon Musk and T-Mobile said they were going to do that, maybe in a year from now, but they had to get the announcement before Apple. This is probably a good thing, that you can do emergency calls or emergency text from anywhere on Earth. That's one of the things that's coming. Another thing that's coming, well, why don't I let you talk about it? I sent you some remarkable pictures that were created by just putting in a little bit of text, like a spaceship in the style of Renoir. What did you think of the ones I sent you?
Dave, I didn't have a chance to see the photos. I read the story.
No, last week's.
Oh, I mean, they were stunning. They were stunning. I don't know if Bennett is familiar with any of the DALI technology where you can write text or verbally say text, and the AI algorithm produces incredible images. I mean, it's I mean, it's scary, but it's stunning and it's exciting all at the same time.
The folks that were watching tonight really can use that when it starts working well for video. Most of what we're seeing was stills. It's a technique of an artificial intelligence called diffusion, and it really does an incredible job. Jenny is being commissioned to work on a comic book that's going to be a STEM-oriented superhero. And she got into some Mayan pre-Columbian art at the Brooklyn Museum. Well, I can go and using the diffusion techniques, some of which are now in the public domain, that's this week's news, and say Mayan superhero or Mayan human sacrifice or anything like that, and have them go pick up by reference, probably a few thousand illustrations in Mayan style, tens of thousands of superhero illustrations, put them together and come up with something amazingly decent. Ben, have you seen that kind of stuff?
Yeah, no, I love the Dolly stuff and generative art in general. I don't know. I think I know it's kind of controversial, but I think it's really cool.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be really useful for somebody like Jenny, who doesn't have a budget for an artist, at least for the first draft of the comic, and can start making mock-ups that are going to be surprisingly realistic. So that's the world I've just been in. It's the metaverse where the American fashion was going to all the French, but ignoring the Chinese, which are going to be the really big ones. Then we saw what art could be, and then we saw how the technology is going to be doing a good thing, letting you connect if you happen to get lost in the jungle or the woods, far away from any cell phone signal. Those may be good things, but then you've been seeing a very different world and a very frightening world. You did a really dramatic write-up on what you had and what you saw. So, Stu, why don't you give him a proper introduction and let him talk about it?
Well, again, we're talking with Bennett Cypher from EFF, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, which is an advocacy group for personal privacy. And Ben and his team have done an exhaustive look at a company called Fog Data Science. And they're data brokers, location data brokers. But I'm going to let Bennett tell us about them. Very impressive study. We were talking before we came on air about some of the background that led up to this. Maybe you can start with that, Bennett, and kind of segue into the story.
Sure, yeah. So yeah, the story, you can read it on the EFF blog at EFF.org, and we worked a bit with the Associated Press, who also reported it. It comes out of investigation that goes back about a year, using mostly public records. And the impetus for the investigation was that, we knew this data was out there. So what Fog does is they collect geolocation data, specifically that comes from apps that people install on their phones. And those apps will share that data with advertisers or marketers, or they'll sell it directly to another data broker, usually sort of a more generic, benign sounding one, to make a little extra money on top of whatever they get from their users. And then thousands and thousands of apps are doing this, and on the back end there are these data brokers that will buy data from the advertisers, from the marketers. They'll work with other data brokers, and they do whatever they can to sort of unify data coming from all these different apps and all these different sources, and aggregate it into one product, like one feed that includes information about as many people as they can muster together. So this data is out there. There are people buying and selling it, and we knew that. The other thread here is that some really good reporting coming out of Motherboard, the Wall Street Journal, Protocol, a couple other places in the past 3 or 4 years has shown that this data is actually ending up in the hands of the federal government, the U.S. government. So there are a couple companies. One is called Ventel, one is called Babel Street. There's another one called Anomaly 6, and they'll buy this data that's like, originates from ad tech or from consumer data brokers, and they will package and sell it to agencies like Customs and Border Patrol, ICE, the FBI, the Secret Service, the Special Forces, the military. And so this has been reported on, kind of vaguely, just in bits and pieces. Like there'll be a heavily redacted FOIA document here. There'll be a confidential source there who leaks some information. And so we knew this was happening, but we didn't really know the scale of it. And what we wanted to look at was whether the same kind of thing was happening at the local level. So, we know like the special forces are buying this kind of data. ICE is buying this kind of data, but they don't do law enforcement in the traditional sense. Like they generally, their investigations don't have the same kind of procedural requirements that the local police have when they're tracking a suspect or tracking down a lead. And to us, a real danger of this marketplace and of this data is that it implicates really sensitive information. It contains really sensitive information about people. Like if you look at this data stream, you can see the precise movements of millions of people mapped out over months and months and months. So it's really a vector for mass surveillance. And local police departments usually don't have access to that kind of thing.
Break that down for us a little bit. Exactly,
Sure.
what kind of things would the location data show? Take an average person, and what would law enforcement or whoever buys this data be able to see and know and learn about a person?
Right. Yeah, so good question. So the way Fog's service in particular works is they have this map. It looks like Google Maps. And there's a service that police log into. It's just a website, and it shows them this big map, and then they can make queries. So what they can do is they can draw a box around a particular area, and they specify a given time. So you could circle a couple of city blocks maybe, and then you can say, I want to know all the devices that were in that area over this 12-hour period last month or something like that. And then the service will, look through all its data and spit out every instance of a device that was seen in that area. So, if there were 100 people in the data set who, had walked through that area in that time window, all 100 of those people are going to show up, and it'll show like, little dots where each one of their phones checked in, and the data made its way up to Fog. And then what they can do is the police can, click on any one of those devices that shows up in that first query and blow up their location history. So they can see where that specific device went for, months and months leading up to that window or after that window. And Fog calls this a pattern of life analysis. So, you can take a device that, you can be like, all right, say there was a protest against police violence at a particular time, and it got ugly. There was a clash.
No. There wasn't police violence at a particular time. There's police violence at almost every time. Let's be real.
So say there's something that was particularly embarrassing to the police that happened at this particular protest, and they want to, give some people a hard time about it. They can, draw their box around the protest zone at the time that it took place. They can see all the devices that show up there. They can click on any one of those devices and zoom in to see everywhere that that person went over weeks, months, even years. And so that'll show, where they sleep, where they work, where they go on a Friday night, where they worship, what kind of, where they're going to get medical treatment. Like really every part of your life, more or less, is implicated by your location history like this over a long enough time frame. And so again, that's just that's a couple mouse clicks, and that information is available about any one of the devices that's in FOG's data set.
Wow. That's stunning invasion of privacy in my mind, that they could capture this kind of data. Is any kind of warrant required to get this data?
So from what we understand, FOG doesn't require any warrants to access its data. It sells a subscription service. You pay, I think these days it costs $9,000 a year or so. The police will pay that, and they'll be able to make 100 of these queries every month, and they can pay extra money to be able to make more queries. And after that, after the department has access, someone just logs in, with an email and password, and right from their web browser, they can make the queries, and the system will automatically give them the data back. There's no paperwork required in that loop. Some of the police departments that we got records from, it did seem like their sort of internal police attorneys thought that they needed warrants in order to access this data, like especially in California, because California has a law called ECPA, I think it's the Electronic Communications Privacy Act, CAL-ECPA, which is more protective than the laws in a lot of other states. And so some of the California departments that we got records from, they said it's our policy to seek a warrant before we actually query this data set. But a lot of other places, we didn't get any policy like that. And there was no indication in the records that we got that they were, using this service after getting any kind of paperwork. It seemed like they might just be using it. It seems like it's kind of hard to prove the negative there because we were getting emails and presentations and that kind of thing. And so it seems like for the departments that were not using warrants, it's a little bit unlikely that they would say right out that it's our policy not to use warrants when we're using this technology. But it definitely seems like at least a few places were. And we talked to a whistleblower, ex data analyst for the Greensboro Police Department, named Davin Hall, and he told us that their department was using it without warrants. They didn't think that they needed warrants to do this. They would do it to generate leads or what have you. And he was really concerned about it, and he raised the Fourth Amendment concerns with with his superiors and with the police attorney, and they shut him down. And he ended up leaving the department and writing about this issue to the city council, and he got shut down again. They said, no, we're pretty sure this is legal. Ignore this guy. Don't worry about it. We're going to keep using this. And so anyway, some places are using it without warrants. Some places are. It does seem like they're getting warrants. But even if you're getting a warrant to use this kind of service, these look like there's another technology that gives sort of a similar access to data to police, which are called geofence warrants. I don't know if you guys are familiar with those at all.
Yeah, we had some folks.
We had a whole show
about that.
Yeah. So anyway, with the geofence warrant, the police write something up, they send it to Google, and Google's lawyers will look at it, presumably, and then there's a judge involved, there's lawyers on both sides involved. It takes 2 to 3 weeks for Google to actually give the data back to the police department. There's a lot of friction there. With FOG, even if there is a court order involved, it's like this is a point and click thing, and they can get the data instantly. And there's no company on the other side who's incentivized to push back, right? Like if anything, Fog is incentivized to give them as much data as they want and more. And so we think, even if some departments are using warrants to access this data, it's likely that a lot of those warrants are unconstitutional. So yeah, anyway, there's a lot of concerns. And the other thing is, like, this data is out there. Like, it's not just police who can access this. There's all kinds of private companies who are buying it. We don't even know. Like, luckily, we have investigative tools to peel back a little bit of the curtain on what police are doing through public records requests, through FOIA. But there could be private investigators, repo companies. We know there are politically motivated groups out there, like Dinesh D'Souza's latest documentary, where he worked with a group called True the Vote. He tried to prove that there was voter fraud, and it's complete nonsense, their whole argument.
Hold on a second.
Yeah.
I think I want to remind you that we shouldn't feed trolls. And
no, okay.
He was a legitimate scholar once upon a time, but at this point, I think we should treat him like a troll and not give him any more publicity than he already gets. Is that fair?
I won't talk about him anymore. But that's just to say that groups like that are buying the same kind of data. Like, that group was able to just go on the open market, spend probably a few tens of thousands, maybe a couple $100,000, we don't know, and access geolocation data about millions of people taken from these same, ad tech and data broker sources, just because they wrote a check. Like, there's no checks and balances here. The police can access it, but so can anyone else. And it happens completely in the dark. And I don't think nearly enough people are aware of that. And so, like, the root of the problem, the police are a problem in a lot of ways, not just this, but, the police are a problem here too. But, like, I think the root of this problem goes back to, the companies like Google, Apple, and all the private advertising companies that are pumping the data into this system. And then we're seeing a little bit of it trickle out into the police as well, where it can be used for, to promote and assist in state violence. But it's also just a symptom of a larger issue.
Wow. Okay, we're going to take a brief break here. We're speaking with Bennett Cypher, staff technologist on tech projects at the Electronic Frontier Foundation. You're listening to WHCR 90.3 FM, Community and Technology, with Dave Burstein and Stu Reed. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back with Community Technology. Dave Burstein and Stu Reed. Special guest, Ben Cypher, who's a special advisor to EFF and a current law student at UC Berkeley. Welcome back, Ben.
Thank you so much.
Okay, Dave, you wanted to say something about EFF before we
Very
go further?
quickly, because I'm a reporter and I learned to be careful about these things. For the record, I have made small contributions to EFF. At this stage in my life, they're unfortunately all small contributions, but I should tell the audience that yes, I'm a financial supporter of this organization. Thanks.
Okay, thanks for that disclosure, Dave. Okay, we've been talking with Ben Cyphers about fog science, fog data science. Incredible data gathering, location data gathering outfit. Ben, how big? I mean, I read what in your story that they process over 250 million devices per month. Is that, you think that's a real number, or are they just kind of beating their chest? What's going on there?
I mean, that's what they say. I would take that with a grain of salt, personally, but I think, I think you can at least take the order of magnitude away from that. Like, I think it's safe to say that it's hundreds of millions of devices. 250 million, and they claim that's in the United States. And, there's what, 300 something million people who live in the US. I would honestly be surprised if it's that high. So one kind of interesting thing that we noticed in some of the records, especially the more recent ones, is that, Apple made a change in iOS about a year and a half ago now, I think, maybe 2 years, where they changed the default option for allowing, people to be tracked through apps from making an opt-out, so you had to go out of your way to turn it off, to opt-in. So now when you install an app on iPhone, it'll ask you if you want to let that app track you. And if you say no, it doesn't expose device identifiers or other bits of information that the app would need to, effectively gather your data and sell it to data brokers like Fog. And what we noticed is there were some emails from, police clients of Fog who said that after the Apple change, the service actually got less useful, and there might be less data flowing into the system thanks to that one, relatively simple change that Apple made. Of course, Android, which is owned by Google, who is, massive ad tech company, the biggest online ad company in the world, has not made that change. On Android, by default, every app is still able to track you pretty much as it wants, and you have to go deep into the settings to fiddle with a switch that most people don't know about in order to turn that off. And so there's still a big supply of data that is flowing to these data brokers, and I think it's safe to say that Fog is still, they still have several active contracts with the police departments around the country. They're still collecting data on lots of people, and it's still a huge problem. But I think that goes to show, like, relatively small changes that are made by these gatekeeper platforms can have huge impacts on, the real world tracking capabilities of police departments, data brokers, all these other actors.
Yeah, that was my next question. For the folks that may not be that sophisticated with, how they know that they have these apps, but they don't know maybe about the settings and what happens when you load them up. Just kind of break down for us a little bit about how this data is collected and whether or not, and how users might be able to control access to that location data on any given app.
Sure, yeah. So when you install an app, let's say on Android, the first time you install it, it'll tell you the permissions the app wants, and you have to click OK to get through it. And then for sensitive data like location, usually the first time the app accesses it, it'll throw you a pop-up and say, like, hey, this app wants to access your location. Do you want to let it access it, just this once, whenever the app is open, or all the time? And you choose one of those. And I think most people might be a little wary of that, but for the most part, the apps that are collecting this data are things where it makes sense for them to have your location. It'll be like a weather app where it wants to know where you are, or a navigation app. Waze the navigation app was one example that got brought up a lot in the literature that we saw coming from fog data science. You know, there's lots of apps where, you know, it might track your driving, or it might track your, you know, your fitness habits or something like that, and they have some reason for asking for your location, and most people don't think twice about, you know, what's going to happen after this company gets my data. Like, are they going to sell it to the cops? Like, that's just not something that occurs to you when you install an app. And so it'll be these seemingly innocuous apps, and they have terms of service that are a mile long, and they say things like, we may share data with our trusted partners for basically any reason. And you agree to that because, you know, what are you going to do? Not agree to that? Like, you can't use the app otherwise. And they're always vague. They're never specific. They're always like, they always keep some level of plausible deniability. So anyway, you download the app, you grant it location permissions. If you haven't turned off your ad ID on Android, which I encourage everyone to do, we actually have an explainer on our website, EFF.org, that tells you how to disable your ad identifier on iOS and on Android. Anyway, if you haven't done that,
say it again, Ben. That sounds important. Say that again, please.
Yeah, so the ad identifier is the key. It's the device identifier that allows you know, apps collect it, and then they sell it alongside your location data or whatever else they have to the data brokers, and that allows the data brokers to collect information from hundreds or thousands of different apps and join it all to like a single identity. And then that ad ID kind of becomes the key. It's like the, you know, the anchor to your device that allows all these different actors to, you know, link data about you and build dossiers on you. And so if you disable,
turn that off?
you can turn it off. Yeah, for a long time you couldn't. That's a brand new feature on Android that they added after years and years of pressure. For a long time you could only reset it, and it would give you a new one. Like, you could throw away your old one, get a new one, and then the tracking would pick right up. But as of early 2022, I think newer versions of Android, you can turn it off, and on iOS you can turn it off as well. That's been a feature on that platform for longer. The problem is most people just don't know about it, and you have to go out of your way to do it.
And where can folks go to learn how to do it? There's a site or a link?
Yeah. So I can send you guys a link, but if you just Google disable ad identifier, you should find it, or
Okay.
DuckDuckGo disable ad identifier, and we have a guide on our website, EFF.org. So if you do a site search on our website, you should be able to find the one that we wrote.
Let's keep going with this, because I'm sure you've thought about what people should do and have some more advice.
Sure. Yeah, so turning off your ad identifier, that's sort of the low-hanging fruit. It won't affect your experience at all. That's the really insidious thing about this idea, is that it only serves advertisers and data brokers. It doesn't give you any kind of functionality. It doesn't let the apps do anything for you that they couldn't do already. So it's super easy to do, and everyone should do it. But, you know, you can still be tracked even if your ad identifier is disabled. And this is where you have to do, you know, what in the business we call threat modeling, where you think about, you know, what are you worried about? What kind of actors are you worried about tracking you? And how much convenience are you willing to sacrifice in order to be, you know, sure that you're not being tracked? So probably the next easiest thing to do is just sort of audit the apps that you have on your phone, any third-party apps that you've installed. Think about whether you actually trust the companies that make them, and probably, you know, revoke location permissions from anything that doesn't absolutely need it. Revoke permissions to, you know, other sensitive data like your contact list, anything that doesn't actually absolutely need it. You can disable location permissions altogether on your phone. That'll prevent you know, anyone from using GPS data about you. But, you know, your phone carrier like AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, as long as your phone is on and not in airplane mode, it's going to be pinging cell phone towers as you walk around, and the police can get that data with a warrant. So, you know, if you're seriously concerned about, you know, being a target of law enforcement, you might want to consider, turning off your phone, putting it in airplane mode, and making sure it's not, no wireless signals are leaving it, or just leaving it at home. If you're attending a protest or something like that.
Let's go further into that, because most people don't think they're in serious danger of being tracked by law enforcement. But I know that law enforcement tracks an awful lot of people. How many tens or hundreds of millions of people do you think are regularly tracked by the security forces in the United States? From the NSA to the local police.
I mean, I don't know how to begin to answer that question. It depends what you mean by tracked, right? Like with fog, kind of the insidious thing that's happening is all this data is being collected passively all the time about, again, they claim 250 million people. I don't know if it's quite that high, but it's pretty high. A majority of Americans is what I would guess. And it's just being stored in their databases for later use. And so, you're being a lot of people are being tracked, and no one's looking at that data right away, but it's available to be queried in the future, whenever law enforcement or someone at FOG or another one of these actors that has access to that data feels like it. Same thing with the cell tower info. It's all being collected by the carriers, and then law enforcement can go back and serve a warrant for it whenever they want. But in terms of who's actively looking at your data, yeah, I have no idea. I mean, it's like, how many law enforcement agents are there?
You were alive and conscious when we found out what the NSA was doing, because somebody actually broke that. I think everybody here could agree that many, many people are being tracked because that's what they do.
Yeah.
With this $60 billion budget, the NSA has enormous ability to track us.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's safe to assume that your data is being logged and cataloged and stored somewhere. And then if anyone ever wants to get you, it's it's out there. Like the information about you is already in someone's database, and it's just a matter of someone deciding that they want to, take a closer look at your file. That's how I think about it anyway. But yeah, the NSA, I mean, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I read in one of your stories that some of the data can go back as far as 5 years. Is that true? Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's what we gathered from the records. It seems like FOG's database, they said multiple times that their data goes back to June 2017. So maybe that's the first time they started a business, or they started partnering with a data broker. And up into the most recent records we have, they were still saying that. So it seems like it's pretty safe to assume that, if you were using a phone back in 2017, FOG might have your data, and, police can access it as far back as FOG has. So.
Now, is it only the U.S. government that does this? Tell me what you know about China and India. I've got some stories from there.
I don't. That's not my area of expertise, but I'm sure it's not just the U.S. I mean, we know it's not just the U.S., but we're a U.S.-based org, and we know how to use U.S.-based public records laws. So that's what we looked at. But this stuff is out there. The tech is the same everywhere, and governments have the same incentives everywhere. So I'm sure it's happening in other countries too.
Yeah. Ironically, I think everybody realized the Chinese government is total pervasive surveillance in a way that I think the NSA would only dream of, although maybe the NSA has more than even I realize. But the Chinese have much better privacy laws than we do for everybody except the government. The Chinese companies are under fairly extreme control. The laws of China are pretty clear, and they actually seem to be enforcing it. The latest news is coming out of India, where they are essentially outlawing VPNs. India, nominally the largest democracy in the world, and it's certainly the largest something or other, has now said VPN providers must provide information when the government asks, and most VPN and keep records. Some good VPN people deliberately don't keep records, so they can't be subpoenaed, and is requiring VPNs. So at least 4 major VPNs have now left India.
Hey, break that down for our listeners who might not know what a VPN is, Dave.
A VPN is a piece of software that hides who you are by combining my call right now, which happens to be into Zoom, but could be to my friend at the Soviet embassy, with thousands of other people's calls all at the same time, so that it's very hard to track who's doing what. Most people use it to prevent being caught pirating software and movies and so on. It works, and if you want privacy, it's one of the basic things. Well, they're being dropped in Russia. They've been very hard to access in China, at least for Chinese people. And now the Indians are saying no. The government wants the ability to track you at all times. That's just the way the world is. So it's not just the US. We just happen to have a bigger, more efficient security apparatus, so we probably get more than they do.
Okay, well, we got about 5 minutes left as we kind of wind down. I wanted you to tell us a little bit, Bennett, about Privacy Badger. What is that all about?
Sure, yeah. So Privacy Badger is a tracker blocking extension for browsing the web. It works on Chrome, Firefox, and any of the browsers that are based on Chrome. So most people should be able to download it for their browser of choice. What it does is it blocks third-party trackers on the web. So what does that mean? When you browse the web, you go to any website. I like to use news sites as examples because they're particularly tracker laden. But say you go to CNN.com or something, there will be so your computer talks to the CNN server. They have a dialogue. You say like, I want to view this page. They send you back a bunch of data. Your computer turns that into news stories, videos, that kind of thing. But in the process, CNN will also direct your computer to reach out to a whole bunch of what we call third parties. And so those third parties might be hosting images, videos, useful content that you want to see or that the page needs in order to function. But a lot of those are hosting ads, or they're not hosting anything at all, and the page is just directing you to contact them so that that third party can log the fact that you visited that page, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest culprits here are the biggest culprits in all of digital privacy, Google and Facebook for the most part, but there's a lot of smaller ad tech companies and data brokers as well that are involved. And
smaller can be several $1 billion worth.
Yeah, smaller. By smaller, I mean like Oracle, Axiom. These are still giant corporations. But yeah, smaller in terms of their total footprint. Smaller in terms of they don't own the web. Essentially. So, most websites that you visit, except for EFF.org, no trackers on our site. That's the EFF guarantee. But most websites will have at least a few third-party trackers on them, if for no other reason than those third parties provide useful resources that the site feels like it needs to function. Like Google hosts all kinds of, they host captchas, they host fonts, they host, useful JavaScript code that people need. And so what happens is you're browsing the web, you visit all kinds of different sites, hundreds of different websites, and the vast majority of them are going to have a bunch of different trackers on them. And so, even though you're interacting with all these different companies in all these different contexts, on every one of those, you're going to be phoning home to like the same few trackers. And so even though you're not visiting google.com to get content from most of these sites, Google knows which sites you're visiting and what you're doing there because they're directing your browser to phone home to Google each time you visit one of those sites. And so Privacy Badger identifies requests that are being made to third-party trackers and blocks them. That's what its goal is.
Okay, and that's something that can be downloaded by an average user and added to their browser?
Yep, it's free, it's open source. Go to eff.org/pb, or just search for Privacy Badger and you'll find it.
Mhm. Okay, Dave, we just got a couple minutes left. Any final follow-up questions for Bennett?
What we just heard from Bennett seems unreal. It couldn't possibly be true. But Bennett, are you telling us true what's out there?
It's true. I mean, don't believe me. Check the records. We got them on tape.
Yeah, amazing. We've been speaking with Bennett Cypher, who is a special advisor to EFF, a law student at UC Berkeley, and has done quite a job of research on privacy and in particular on fog data science. Bennett, where can folks go to find more information about this research that you've done?
Yeah, check out, a lot of it's on the front page of our website, eff.org right now. And you can check out our investigation where we collaborated with Garance Burke and Jason Deeren from the Associated Press. And I just want to shout out some of the many people who worked on this research. Beryl Lipton, Dave Moss, Will Greenberg, Josh Richman, Andres Arrieta. There are a whole bunch of people who helped out with this. Adam Schwartz and I know I'm gonna forget some people, but it was a huge team effort from a lot of different people at EFF. Oh, Aaron Mackey, of course, another attorney at EFF. So it wasn't my project; it was a big team effort, and yeah, I'm really proud of the work that we were able to do.
Okay. Well, thank you, Bennett. We've been speaking with Bennett Cypher as a special advisor to EFF and a law student about him and his team's work on investigating fog data science. Do take a look at the website, eff.org, and learn some more about it. This has been Community and Technology, Dave Burstein and Stu Reed. Bennett, we want to thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay. This is WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem. Stay tuned for more news and information. And don't forget to tune in every week, Wednesday, 5 p.m. for Community Technology. Thanks for tuning in. Good night.